My name is Alara, and for most of my life, I believed my name was a misnomer, a cosmic joke. It means shining light, but I have always felt more like a shadow, trailing behind the brilliance of my family. My story, I suppose, begins on the day I married the one person who ever saw a light in me, a day that should have been bathed in sunshine but was instead cast in the long, familiar shadows of my past. To the wild ones who always preferred dirt to diamonds. The toast, delivered by my older sister, Serafina, was met with a ripple of polite, knowing laughter. It hung in the air of the sun-drenched winery pavilion, as delicate and sharp as a shard of the crystal she held aloft. I sat at the head table, the lace of my mother's repurposed wedding gown suddenly feeling coarse against my skin. 200 pairs of eyes, all friends and associates of my affluent family, turned to me and my new husband, Liam. His hand, warm and calloused, found mine beneath the starched white linen. "Let them talk, Elle," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that soothed the frantic beating in my chest. "We know our truth." I looked at him, my Liam. His dark hair was slightly tousled by the breeze, and his eyes, the color of rich earth after a rain, were fixed on me with an unwavering calm. He wore a simple, well-tailored linen suit that couldn't quite disguise the quiet strength in his shoulders, a strength born from real work, not from hours in a gym. He was an anchor in the swirling sea of my family's expectations, and I clung to him. "Smile, darling," my mother, Eleanor, whispered from my other side, her voice tight with a familiar strain. Her fingers, adorned with rings that could have funded our first year of marriage, pressed into my arm. "You look sullen. People will notice." Of course they would. The Astors were a family to be noticed. My father, Richard, was a prominent surgeon. My mother, a formidable force on every charity board in Northwood. And Serafina, my sister, was the star in their constellation. With a Wharton MBA and a vice president title at a top investment firm, she had married Julian, a man whose ambition and polish matched her own. They were a power couple, their lives a curated collection of Hamptons weekends, European holidays, and galas I only ever saw in glossy magazines. And then there was me. Alara, the quiet one, the one with a degree in botany who had chosen to leave the city's gleam for the green, rolling hills of Havenwood. I'd chosen a life that my family considered a quaint, bewildering hobby. I'd chosen Liam, a man they referred to, with a dismissive wave of the hand, as the farmer. My younger sister, Chloe, slipped into the chair beside Liam, her expression a mixture of sympathy and anxiety. At 26, Chloe was the family's gentle heart, forever trying to smooth the waters her older sister and parents so expertly churned. "Serafina is on one today," she whispered, leaning past Liam. "Don't let her get to you. I think what you two have is beautiful." "Really?" "Thanks, Chloe," I managed, trying to return her small, conspiratorial smile. My father stood then, tapping his glass for attention. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his posture impeccable. He surveyed the crowd, his gaze finally landing on me with an expression that was less paternal pride and more bemused resignation. "I'd like to say a few words about my daughter, Alara," he began, his surgeon's voice carrying with practiced authority. My stomach tightened into a knot. "Alara has always marched to the beat of her own drum," he said, and I saw Serafina smirk into her champagne. While her sister was conquering Wall Street, Alara was cultivating her garden. She has chosen a different sort of wealth. A simpler kind. The word simpler was a verdict, delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I could feel the room's collective assessment, the pity masquerading as applause. "She has found a partner in Liam, a man of the earth, who understands the value of fundamental labor." The pause was deliberate, a space for everyone to absorb the contrast between Liam's world and theirs. "We wish them all the happiness in the world. May their life together be as peaceful as the valley they call home." The applause was polite, lukewarm. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, and I knew the tears were for the daughter she felt she had lost, not the one she had just seen married. "That was a speech," Liam said under his breath, squeezing my hand. "He's been workshopping those insults for months," I whispered back, my throat tight. This was the family I was born into. The people who were supposed to be my champions were treating my wedding not as a celebration, but as a gentle, public mourning for a life of lost potential. Every success I'd ever had, my honors degree, the small but thriving business I'd built selling artisanal preserves and organic produce, the peace I had found, was erased by the simple fact that I hadn't chosen their definition of success. I stood up, my chair scraping against the stone floor. A hush fell over the nearby tables. I raised my glass of water, looking directly at my sister, who watched me with a curious, predatory gleam in her eyes. "To family," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected. "The ones who see your light, even when you're standing in the shadows. And to knowing the difference between dirt and diamonds." I took a sip, my eyes locked on hers. Serafina's perfect smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she raised her glass with a flourish. As I sat down, Liam leaned in and whispered, "That's my girl." I held onto his words, a small, warm stone in the palm of my hand. I had no idea then how much I would need that strength, or how prophetic his simple, loving statement would prove to be. 3 years passed in a blur of seasons. At Willow Creek Farm, life was measured not in quarterly reports, but in the first frost, the spring thaw, the scent of lavender blooming in July. Our life wasn't simple, as my family believed. It was complex, demanding, and deeply rewarding. We worked from sunrise to sunset, our hands chapped, our muscles aching, but our hearts full. We had built not just a farm, but a home, a sanctuary carved out of the world, just for us. The annual Astor family 4th of July barbecue was a command performance. We drove our dusty but reliable pickup truck to Northwood, a world away from Havenwood. Pulling up to Serafina and Julian's sprawling stone and glass mansion always felt like crossing into a foreign country. "Alara, Liam, you made it." My mother greeted us on the immaculate flagstone patio. We were just admiring Serafina's new outdoor kitchen. "It's imported from Italy." Serafina drifted towards us, a vision in white linen, a glass of rose in her hand. "Oh, Alara, you brought something," she said, her eyes landing on the rustic basket I held, filled with our farm's heirloom tomatoes, fresh mozzarella, and basil from my garden. She made it sound like I'd brought a stray animal to her party. "Capri salad," I said, placing it on the long catering table where it looked humble and out of place next to platters of lobster rolls and professionally arranged charcuterie. "How charming," Julian said, appearing at his wife's side. His polo shirt was so white it hurt my eyes. "Is it organic? Or just, regular?" "It's from our land," Liam answered, his voice even. He stood beside me, a quiet oak next to Julian's polished marble. "Right, the farming endeavor," Julian said with a patronizing nod. "How is that going?" "Still enjoying the agrarian lifestyle." A few of their friends chuckled. "We're doing well," I said, my jaw tight. "Our CSA program sold out in a week, and we just secured a contract with 3 of the best restaurants in the county." Serafina laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, that's darling. A restaurant contract. Julian just structured a merger worth more than your entire county, sweetie." Now, Serafina," my father interjected, swirling a glass of aged scotch. "But he does have a point, Alara. This venture of yours. It's a fine hobby, but when are you and Liam going to start thinking about a real future? A real career?" "Richard," my mother chided gently, though her eyes held the same question. "We're happy, Richard," Liam said simply. "We love the work. It's honest." "Honest work," Julian repeated, savoring the phrase as if it were a cheap wine he was tasting for sport. "I suppose that's one term for it. I must say, watching you two at these things is like a little anthropological study, observing the simple life in its natural habitat." The laughter from their friends was louder this time. I saw Chloe, across the patio, flinch. "At least our hands are clean," I said, the words slipping out before I could catch them. The laughter stopped. Julian's smile tightened at the corners. "What's that supposed to mean?" Serafina asked, her voice losing its airy quality. "Nothing," I backtracked quickly. "Just that we don't have to deal with office politics." But a line had been crossed. The air grew thick with unspoken things. "Well," my mother announced with forced cheerfulness, "who wants a tour of the new tennis courts?" The group moved away, leaving a vacuum in their wake. Liam touched my elbow. "I'm going to go check on the truck," he said, his voice low. It was our code. It meant he needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with condescension. "I'll come with you," I said. "No, you stay," he insisted gently. "Try to enjoy your family." He said the word enjoy with a tenderness that acknowledged the impossibility of the task. I found Chloe by the saltwater pool, which glittered like a field of sapphires under the afternoon sun. She handed me a glass of iced tea. "They're being particularly awful today," she said, not meeting my eyes. "It's a day ending in Y," I replied, taking a grateful sip. "It's just, things are tense right now," she offered, picking at the label on her bottle of sparkling water. "With Julian's work. Serafina's been on edge. Stressed about which new car to buy?" Chloe hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. She leaned closer. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but some of his big investment strategies haven't been performing well. He took some massive risks. Serafina's been talking about tightening their belts, which for her means flying commercial." Before I could process this, Serafina's voice sliced through the air. "Alara, come settle an argument for us." I walked back towards the group, my stomach twisting. I felt like a gladiator being called back into the arena. "We were just discussing ambition," Serafina announced, her smile wide and sharp. "And I was saying how you've really found your niche. I mean, not everyone is cut out for the pressures of the modern world. Some people thrive well, in a slower lane." The group chuckled obediently. "But I have to ask," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper loud enough for everyone to hear, "don't you ever feel like you've settled? Don't you ever lie awake at night and wonder what you could have been if you'd aimed higher than a vegetable patch?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was a targeted strike, aimed at every insecurity I had ever harbored. I opened my mouth, but she wasn't done. "I'm just saying, some of us build empires. And some of us, well, some of us are content to just watch things grow." She gestured vaguely towards my salad. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Even Julian looked slightly uncomfortable. I set my iced tea down on a table, my hand surprisingly steady. "You're right, Serafina," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "Some of us are content to watch things grow." I paused, letting my words sink in. "And some of us are so busy building empires on foundations of sand that we don't notice when the tide starts coming in." I turned and walked away, not waiting for a response. I found Liam leaning against our truck, staring out at the manicured perfection of the neighborhood. He put his arm around me, and I leaned my head on his shoulder, the clean, earthy scent of him a balm to my frayed nerves. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "More than ready," I said. As we drove away from the land of stone and glass, back towards our world of wood and earth, I had the distinct feeling that a storm was gathering on the horizon, and for once, it wasn't one that I would have to weather alone. 6 months later, the storm broke. It started not with a thunderclap, but with a strange and unsettling silence. The weekly calls from my mother, usually a detailed report of Serafina's latest triumph, dwindled to brief, strained conversations. "How is everyone?" I'd ask. "Oh, fine, dear. Just busy," she'd reply, her voice thin. "Your father's at the hospital. I have to go." Click. The first real tremor came on Chloe's birthday. We met at a quiet bistro in a neighboring town, a place my parents would have deemed unacceptably rustic. "Where is everybody?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Liam was parking the truck. Mom and Dad had a last-minute thing, she said, avoiding my gaze. And Serafina and Julian are swamped with work. On a Saturday night, Chloe shredded a napkin in her lap. Things are bad, really bad. Liam slid in beside me, his presence a quiet comfort. What kind of bad, Chloe? He asked gently. She looked up, her eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen in her before. Julian's firm. It's collapsing. Some high-risk fund he managed went belly up. He didn't just lose his clients' money. He lost everything. They put the Northwood house on the market last week. The cars are gone. Serafina has been calling relatives, asking for money. A cold knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't triumph, not exactly. It was a dizzying, hollow feeling. Have they called you? Liam asked. Chloe shook her head. I don't have anything to give. But they haven't called you yet, have they? No, I said. The unspoken words hung in the air. They haven't called the simple farmers, the family disappointments, because what could we possibly have to offer? She's different, Chloe whispered. Serafina, she's like a ghost. All that polish has just flaked away. We ate our dinner in a haze, the conversation stilted. But I could feel the wheels turning in my own mind, a complicated mix of dread and a dark, shameful flicker of vindication. A week later, while Liam and I were mending a fence along the west pasture, my phone rang. It was my mother, Alara. Her voice was fragile, like old paper. Mom? Are you okay? I'm fine, darling. Just tired. Listen, can you and Liam come to the house on Saturday? There are some family matters we need to discuss. All of us. Family matters was the Astor code for a crisis. What's it about? It's better if we talk in person. 2:00. I looked at Liam, who had stopped working and was watching me, his expression unreadable. I guess so. Is everything okay? We'll talk on Saturday, she said, and hung up. Family meeting? Liam asked, though he already knew the answer. It sounds like it. They're going to ask us for something, he said. It wasn't a question. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in the quiet of our bedroom, listening to the sound of the wind in the willow tree outside our window. A part of me, the part that still carried the sting of 1,000 slights, felt a grim sense of anticipation. After a lifetime of being dismissed, they were finally turning to me. The irony was a bitter pill. All their talk of real life and real money, and now their world was crumbling while ours stood firm. But another part of me, the part that remembered a childhood of trailing after Serafina, desperate for her approval, felt a deep, aching sadness for the storm that had finally broken over their heads. Saturday was gray and damp, the sky weeping a soft, persistent drizzle. The drive to Northwood was heavy with a silence that felt different from our usual comfortable quiet. As we pulled into the long, curving driveway of my parents' home, Liam put his hand on my knee. Remember who you are, Alara, he said, his voice firm. You don't owe them your life because they gave you one. I looked at the house I grew up in, a place of pristine lawns and unspoken rules. It seemed smaller now, less intimidating. I know. As we walked up the slate path, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Alara, it's Serafina. Please. We need you. This is an emergency. The sister who had built her identity on being superior to me was now pleading for my help. I took a deep breath, slipped the phone into my pocket, and rang the bell. The heavy oak door swung open, and the second act of my life began. The living room was arranged like a tribunal. My parents sat side by side on the silk sofa, their faces etched with a weary anxiety. Serafina was curled in a wingback chair, looking small and fragile, a stark contrast to her usual regal posture. Julian stood by the grand fireplace, staring into the unlit hearth, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Chloe sat on the ottoman, wringing her hands, and shot me a look of profound apology. 2 empty chairs faced them, waiting for us. Alara. Liam, my father said, his voice stripped of its usual booming confidence. Thank you for coming. We sat, and the silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Mom's text sounded urgent, I said, breaking the quiet. What's going on? My mother fussed with a loose thread on a cushion. It's about the family's financial situation. Julian's company, I stated, not wanting to play games. Julian finally turned, and I was shocked at how he looked. The arrogant glint in his eye was gone, replaced by a hollow, hunted look. Your sister told you, I assume, he said, his voice rough. Chloe mentioned there were some issues. Issues? Julian let out a short, bitter laugh. That's a delicate way of putting it. What Julian is trying to say, my father interjected, taking control, is that through a series of catastrophic market events, the family has lost its primary assets. We are facing total financial ruin. Everything. Liam asked quietly. This house. Our retirement funds. Serafina and Julian's portfolio. Everything, my father confirmed, his voice flat. Julian was managing our investments. He made a poor judgment call. I looked at my brother-in-law, who was now glaring at me as if I were somehow responsible for his failure. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. But I don't understand what it has to do with us. It was Serafina who answered, her voice raspy. We need your help, Alara. For the first time, she looked at me not as a rival or a disappointment, but as a potential savior. We need you to save us. Save you how? The farm, my father said bluntly. Willow Creek. We need you to sell it. The air left my lungs. I'm sorry. It's the only significant asset left that's unencumbered, my mother explained, her voice pleading. The land is valuable. If you sell it, the proceeds would be enough to cover the most critical debts. It would give us a chance to start again. I felt Liam's hand cover mine, a warm, solid weight. You want us to sell our home, I said slowly, making sure I understood. Our business. Our entire life. To pay for your mistakes. It's not about mistakes, it's about family. Julian's voice rose, cracking with desperation. It's about loyalty. Loyalty? The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I stood up, unable to sit still. Where was this family loyalty for the past 5 years? Where was it at every holiday, every birthday, when you were all making jokes at our expense? Treating my husband like a hired hand. That's not fair, my father said, though he couldn't meet my eyes. Isn't it? You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about being told my life was a quaint hobby. Let's talk about being mocked for preferring dirt to diamonds. Now the diamonds are gone, and suddenly the dirt looks pretty valuable, doesn't it? Alara, please, my mother wept. We're your family. We're begging you. And now you're begging? After years of treating us like we were nothing, now you need us, so we're family again. This isn't about the past. Serafina cried, getting to her feet. This is about survival. My daughter, Annabelle, what about her future? Her school? Her home? What about our future? I shot back. The one we built with our own 2 hands, without a single bit of help or encouragement from any of you? You don't have children, she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You don't understand what it's like to have everything at stake. The low blow landed exactly as she'd intended. The implication that our life, our dreams, our future was worth less because we hadn't yet had a child, hung in the air, ugly and unforgivable. I saw Liam's jaw clench, a muscle twitching in his cheek. I think we're done here, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He stood and moved towards the door. Wait, my father said, a note of command returning to his voice. We're not asking you to think about it for weeks. The creditors are circling. We need your answer by the end of the day. You're giving us an ultimatum? I asked, incredulous. You're giving us a few hours to decide whether or not to dismantle our entire world for you? Don't be so dramatic, Alara, Serafina snapped. It's a piece of land. We're talking about people's lives. It's our life, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't known I possessed. I grabbed my bag. We're leaving. You'll regret this, Alara. My father called after us as we walked out the door. You'll regret turning your back on the people who raised you. I stopped on the porch and turned back to face him, my hand on the cool, damp railing. The people who raised me taught me that my worth was measured by my income and my address. The man I married taught me my worth is inherent. I think I'll stick with his lesson. We walked to our truck in silence, the drizzle turning into a steady rain. As Liam opened my door, I looked back at the house one last time. They were all there in the doorway, a tableau of desperate, broken people. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in their presence. I just felt sad. And then, for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. The drive back to Havenwood was a blur. The rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers was the only sound. We pulled into our driveway, and the sight of our small, sturdy farmhouse, with its welcoming yellow light glowing in the windows, felt like a haven in a raging storm. This was what they wanted to liquidate. This was the asset they wanted to cash in. "I need to show you something," Liam said as we got out of the truck. His voice was grim. "Liam, my answer is no. It's always going to be no." "I know," he said, his hand on my back, guiding me not towards the house, but towards the large barn that served as the heart of our operation. "This isn't about that. This is about the truth. All of it." I followed him into the familiar scent of hay, soil, and oiled machinery. He led me to his small, cluttered office at the back, a space I'd been in 1,000 times. He walked to a heavy, fireproof filing cabinet in the corner, a cabinet I'd always assumed held old receipts and equipment manuals, and unlocked it with a key from his pocket. "Sit down, Elle," he said, pulling out a stack of thick folders. "You're scaring me." "I'm not. I'm arming you." He opened the first folder and began laying documents across his worn wooden desk. Legal papers, technical schematics, and financial statements with columns of numbers that made my head swim. "What is all of this?" "This," he said, tapping a document, "is the patent for the closed-loop, solar-powered irrigation system we use. The one I designed 5 years ago." My eyes scanned the header, U.S. Patent 9,845,112. Inventor, Liam Connor, Ph.D. Ph.D. I whispered. "You never told me you had a Ph.D. Agricultural engineering from Cornell." It didn't seem relevant when we were just trying to get the well dug. He pulled out another folder. "This is our proprietary soil sensor technology. It provides real-time data on nutrient levels and moisture, cutting water usage by 40% and eliminating the need for chemical fertilizers." Another patent. Another series of licensing agreements with agricultural corporations I'd read about in trade journals. My world tilted on its axis. "You, this whole time." "Willow Creek Farm isn't just a farm, Alara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's our laboratory. Our proof of concept. The company is called Terra Nova Solutions. I founded it 7 years ago, right before I met you." I stared at a bank statement, at a number in the final balance that had so many zeros I couldn't process it. "We're worth this much?" "The company is." "We are. And it's growing." I looked at him, my husband, the man I thought I knew better than my own heart. "Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let them? Why did you let me?" My voice broke. "Do you know what it's been like? All these years? Feeling like we were the poor relations? Feeling like maybe they were right. Maybe I had settled. Maybe I was a failure." He reached for my hand, and this time I let him take it. His grip was tight. "I am so sorry, Alara. I never, ever wanted you to feel that way. At first, I kept it quiet because I wanted to build it on my own terms, without your family's money or influence. And then I saw how they treated you. How they treated us. And I wanted to see who they really were, stripped of their assumptions. I wanted them to show their true colors. I needed to know if they would ever love you for you, not for what you had. So you let me be humiliated? As some kind of test." The hurt was a sharp pain in my chest. "I let them humiliate themselves," he corrected softly. "But I see now that it hurt you in the process, and for that I will never forgive myself. But there's more. You need to know why this happened. Why Julian's firm really collapsed. He pulled out the final folder. He didn't just make a bad investment, Elle. He made a very specific one. He took a massive short position against a new, disruptive agricultural tech company he was sure was overvalued and bound to fail. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. He bet against us. He bet against Terra Nova Solutions, Liam confirmed. He put everything, his money, his other clients' money, your parents' retirement savings, on the belief that a company run by a simple farmer from Havenwood was worthless. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Chloe. They're coming to the farm. Now. Dad is furious. He said they won't leave until you sign the papers. I showed the text to Liam. A strange, cold calm settled over him. He stood up and began gathering the documents back into their folders. Good, he said. Let them come. Good? Liam, they're going to be impossible. They'll scream and threaten and we're going to show them what a foundation of rock looks like compared to their foundation of sand. His eyes met mine, and in their earthy depths, I saw not just the gentle man I loved, but a man of formidable strength and unshakable resolve. It's time they learned the difference between dirt and diamonds, Alara. And we're about to give them a geology lesson. They arrived as the rain began to fall in earnest, a caravan of borrowed, down-market sedans that looked alien and out of place in our muddy driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as they got out, my father, his face a mask of thunder, my mother, looking lost and frail, a hollowed-out Serafina, and a broken Julian. Showtime, Liam said, placing a reassuring hand on the small of my back. The knock on the door was less a request and more a demand. I opened it to my family, dripping and defeated, but still clinging to the last vestiges of their entitlement. We need to talk, my father said, brushing past me into our warm, simple living room. Come in, I said, my voice steady. They stood awkwardly on the handmade rag rug, their eyes darting around the room, assessing, judging. We've brought the sale agreement, Julian said, his voice flat. He slapped a folder onto our pine coffee table. We even have a buyer lined up. A developer. All you have to do is sign. I looked from the folder to the faces of my family. You found a developer for our land without even asking us? We're trying to be pragmatic, Alara, my mother said. There's no time for sentiment. Whose sentiment? Liam asked, stepping forward from the shadows of the hallway. And whose time? He carried 3 large folders, which he placed on the table next to Julian's. We're not playing games, Liam, my father snapped. Neither are we, Liam said. He opened the first folder. Julian, in your professional opinion, what's Apex Capital Partners worth today? Julian flinched. That's not relevant. I think it is. But let's talk about our company. Terra Nova Solutions. Liam laid the first patent on the table. Then the second. Then the third. All developed, tested, and perfected right here, on this piece of land. The current valuation of the intellectual property alone is north of $80 million. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the rain against the windows. Serafina sank into a chair. That's not possible. Oh, it's very possible, Liam continued, his voice calm and lethal. But here's the most interesting part. The part that answers the question of why your firm collapsed, Julian. He opened the last folder. This is a record of the short sale you executed against our company. You risked $2.5 million of your client's money, including every cent your in-laws had, on our failure. My father's face went ashen. My mother made a small, wounded sound. The irony, Liam said, his eyes locking onto Julian's, is that your bet against us triggered a buy-up from our institutional investors, causing our stock to soar. Every dollar you lost, we gained. You didn't just lose your family's fortune. You handed it to us. The front door opened, and a man in a sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase, stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat. Marcus, thanks for coming, Liam said. Everyone, this is our attorney, Marcus Thorne. Marcus smiled thinly at the stunned group. I understand, he said, setting his briefcase down with a solid thud, that we have some things to discuss. For the next hour, Marcus calmly and methodically dismantled every last remnant of my family's position. He explained the corporate structure of Terra Nova Solutions, the legal protections of the farm as a research facility, and the futility of any legal action they might consider. When he was done, I finally spoke. For my entire life, I began, my voice trembling slightly before finding its strength, I have lived in your shadow. I have been the disappointment, the afterthought, the simple one. You never once asked about my life with any genuine interest. You never once saw my husband as anything more than a laborer. You never saw us. I looked at Serafina. You asked me if I ever wondered what I could have been. The truth is, I knew what I was all along. I was building a life of purpose and meaning. You were the ones who couldn't see it, because you were blinded by your own narrow definition of success. We're sorry, my mother sobbed. Alara, we're so sorry. We made terrible mistakes. But we're still your family. Are you? I asked, and the question was for myself as much as for them. A family supports. A family encourages. A family loves unconditionally. By that definition, you stopped being my family a long time ago. So what now? My father asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. You're just going to watch us lose everything? I looked at Liam, and he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. The decision was mine. The company will be making an offer to buy out the debt of Apex Capital's smaller, non-family investors at 50 cents on the dollar, I said, the words coming to me with a sudden clarity. The teachers, the doctors, the small business owners Julian gambled with. They don't deserve to lose their life savings because of your arrogance. They will be made as whole as we can make them. And us, Serafina whispered. What about us? I took a deep breath. That's for you to figure out. You built your life on a foundation of sand. Now the tide has come in. You'll have to learn to build something new. Something real. And you'll have to do it on your own. I walked to the door and opened it. The rain had softened to a gentle mist. The meeting is over. They filed out, one by one, their faces a mixture of shock, shame, and disbelief. Only Chloe paused at the door. Elle, she said, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I know, I said. Call me next week. We'll talk. She nodded and hurried out to the car. I closed the door and leaned against it. The solid would cool against my back. The quiet returned, but this time it was a peaceful, cleansing silence. Liam came and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Are you okay? I turned in his arms and looked up at him. I've never been better. We stood there for a long time, listening to the rain on the roof of the home we had built and the life we had saved. The next day, the sun came out, washing the world clean. I walked out into my garden, the air fresh and smelling of wet earth. I knelt down, sinking my hands into the rich, dark soil, the dirt my sister had so disdained. It was real. It was nourishing. It was the foundation of everything. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from Serafina. There was no apology, no begging. It was just a single, folded piece of paper. Inside was a small, pressed wildflower, the kind that grew in the meadows of my childhood, the kind we used to pick together before we learned the world had other, harder things to value. I didn't know if it was a peace offering or a farewell. Maybe it was both. But as I held the delicate, faded flower in my palm, I knew that my own roots were strong, planted deep in the life I had chosen. I was no longer a shadow. I was Alara. And I was finally standing in my own light.